So yeah, basically, if I'm just going to talk about the import because you've already probably imported. If you've scaled your scene, there's a chance that um, you might have sort of moved the camera out of position from your Maya setup. So I'll just take a look at that in here. So there's a chance, yeah, if you've brought your stuff in from Zbrush, if you've scaled things, or if you've just moved around, you may have shifted off the camera, and that's fine. So in this case, I have a 1-to-1. You could always try to just select the camera and export it as an FBX and import it. But in this case, I'm okay with just an approximate, so if you've moved around, you just want to kind of roughly match the framing and camera POV. One thing I recommend doing is making sure you set the resolution of your canvas. So in this case, we do want this to be I want it to be 4K ideally, or full HD at the minimum. So for this, it's 3840 by 2160, and you're going to hit resize. Oops. 3840, and we'll turn off proportional if it sort of skews that. Sometimes it'll try to maintain the proportions of the current image, but I want my own proportions. 2160, hit resize. It'll leave kind of a pixelated version of what was on screen, so you just have to hit Control-N to clear the canvas. Then I usually like to zoom out because this document now is bigger than this workspace, and you can sort of tell. I'll just sort of show you how to do this. If you go to Documents and on the border, click on this color, you can now see a clear differentiation, right, between the actual workspace, or the void around the workspace, and the document, okay? So if I click and drag this back out, I'll hit T to edit, and make sure you're in perspective as well, because this is a perspective shot. In the draw menu, this is where the kind of cameras sort of live. So you do have stored camera. So chances are you might still have it in there. You can try to lock back into that. If you do have that, that's great. If not, like I said, you can, so let's say I didn't have that. All right, so I'm going to kind of approximately frame, and you can even reframe a bit. I don't necessarily mind that either. So let's say I decide to reframe. If you go into the draw menu, there are different focal lengths. I think in this project, the student left the default to 35, which is fine if it works for the composition, but I highly recommend you don't leave the camera at the default 35. So in my case, I might suggest a wider angle, since it's kind of a more grandiose scene. So that way we can also maybe have a bit more right, kind of first person view. Maybe we're looking up at this, right? It's kind of a circus. So that would be okay, okay? Now for the renders themselves, it's pretty straightforward. You can leave this as is and simply go to Documents, Export. So this is the bare bones method I'll show you, and then I'll show you the slightly better, or fairly better version of this. So I'll just hit save. It's basically saving as a JPEG. I'm okay with that. I'll hit OK. So now if I double click this, it's going to be a huge 4K res, right, render. What I do recommend, number one, if you're doing this method, is to turn the inactive subtool dimming to 1. So that just ensures that everything is clearly visible. And I do want things to be in a sort of shiny gray reflective material. So I find blend is good. Sometimes matcap gray is okay. So it just depends on maybe your angle, and the basic is also good. But for me, blend is usually good for most of these things. So this just allows me to see the sculptural attention to detail, okay? So I'll go back to document. Again, it's just simply export. I'll save over. Okay, hit OK. Now, if you want better quality, you can hit BPR. BPR will actually be quite slow at higher resolutions and with a lot more mesh. And there's also a lot of shadows and stuff that we have to kind of fight with. So again, just for presentation purposes, I do find the pixel quality is significantly better. So for that, I want to keep that, but maybe turn off the shadows. So if you go into render, right, and then go down to render properties, you can actually just simply deactivate shadows. Sometimes I'll also do this where I basically turn on depth Q, soft Z, and soft RGB. These basically just kind of add a little bit of a sense of depth of field. Again, not super important because I'm mainly just displaying, the mesh here, but like I said, if we kind of snap out of this and you hit BPR, you will get better kind of pixel handling from the scene. So I'll go back to document, basically exports. So yeah, I'll say this is my cam sculpt view. Okay. You're going to include a still from here, from the my viewport as well in 4K. So that's kind of the same process, right? We've sort of seen it before, where you can either just do a play blast, like a 2-frame play blast at full res, and again, you can sort of pick your own custom resolution. 3840 by 2160. Apply. Okay. Now there's some clipping issues here too, so I would just select on the camera and make sure my near clipping plane is set to at least 1, maybe 2 or 5 even. It just depends on how the scene looks relative to the camera. And again, just make sure there's a basic blend on everything, the same material. You should have the same screenshot, by the way, from the previous assignment, so that can just be swapped in. Yeah, I'm just noticing too, sometimes you may have shading issues. This looks like some kind of issue with the normals, so I usually will just click on Soften Harden Edge, and if it doesn't work after that, sometimes you can click on this, and if you go to Mesh Display, you can click on Set to Face, and that can help fix some of this weird shading, which has improved it. And then I'll go back and basically do Soften Harden Edge again. So what that is doing is sometimes the normals, which is the way the shading is calculated across the surface, gets locked, and so you have to potentially unlock it. Okay. So yeah, let's play blast again. An image sequence is fine, PNG is fine. Again, max scale, max quality if there's a quality slider. And I'll just save this to, again, I don't recommend just dumping everything into your downloads folder like I'm doing, but put it into the proper project folder. In this case, I'll call it, cam blocking, let's say, okay? Play blast. And I'll just delete one of the 2 frames. Okay, so this will allow me to kind of flick back and forth between the 2, okay? Now, I don't want a higher res version. In this case, you're seeing the higher res version, so I'd want to see the very rough, like roughly blocked version, okay? For the rest of the views, it's pretty much the same. I do want basically a top-down view, so for this, I usually recommend just simply turning off perspective. Again, you may change materials because sometimes the blend is a bit too reflective, so sometimes I'll switch to like a matte cap gray. Again, I want to try to fill my frame as best as possible, so I'm going to try to include as much as I can. And then simply, if you want to hit BPR again, you can. If you also wanted to include the ambient preview, that can sometimes help too, but in this case, it's not doing much. So we'll go to Documents, Exports. So this will be my top. Hit OK. And then I typically would like a sort of side or profile render. You may wish to do a front view. I don't necessarily mind that, but I typically want to sort of see. So if you have a wall or something obstructing the view, you can hide the one wall, right? And then we can sort of just get a sense of the orientation and layout. Document export. Side. Okay. And then if there's areas that you're particularly proud of that you've done a lot of work on, right? So you can go in and have one or more shots. I suggest one at a minimum because chances are there's at least one thing that you've done a lot of sculpting on. So just find what that area is. Again, I would probably re-enable perspective, right? Like some of these lights and things are really cool. So you could do that, okay? Document, export. Detail 1. Okay.